Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Eric Webb, SAP Concur's VP of Global Solutions Consulting, and I'm excited to host this webinar. We have over 500 participants today, and we're connecting a lot of different functions. We're representing anything from travel management, procurement, finance, HR, and IT. A business's greatest assets are their employees, and typically they're the hardest and most expensive ones to replace. Today's workforce wants the assurance their organizations are doing the utmost to safeguard the environment. 2020 has only accelerated climate action with a real-life simulation of how the reduction of travel has impacted the environment. As we look forward to the post-pandemic new normal, and what that's going to look like, today's discussion is an opportunity to explore the future of corporate travel, putting people at the center. How can the employee experience adapt to help individuals stay true to their own sustainability principles when traveling for work? We'll discuss this in 3 topics. Those are the employee's control, changing behaviors and attitudes, and then what HR's role is as change agents. Again, I'm Eric Webb, SAP Concur's VP of Solutions Consulting globally, and we have a panel with us today, and I'll start with Viviane Wolf.
Hello everyone, so I'm Viviane Wolf. I'm working at BNP Paribas. I'm Global Travel Category Manager. So me and my team, we are in charge of the travel procurement and the travel management for BNP Paribas for all countries and all entities. And I would say, as a bank, sustainability is important to us because we are here to help our clients to transition toward a more ecological world, and sustainable investments are part of that. And in my daily job, I also see sustainability getting more and more important. And I would say in procurement, the target here is not only now to reach savings, but also to help our company to transition for more sustainable travel.
Thank you, Viviane. Seema, would you mind introducing yourself?
Thanks, Eric, and really excited to be with you all for the discussion today. So my name is Seema Farazi. I'm a partner in EY. Corporate sustainability is something that's really important to us at EY, but I'm here today to talk with you in my capacity as our EMEA PAS COVID-19 response leader, and to talk about how we're working with clients to try and build forward from the pandemic with much more sustainable policies around people and travel.
Excellent, Seema. I'm looking forward to hearing that. Annette, over to you.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Annette. I'm working for the Lufthansa Group, and I've just taken over the head of corporate responsibility. So this covers a wide field of environmental, social, and governance topics. However, of course, for us as an airline, it's most important to reduce our carbon footprint and being compliant with the Paris goal. So that's one of the big focus points of my work, and happy to be here to talk about solutions.
Fantastic, Annette, and congratulations on the new role. Eric, fantastic name. Eric Rode, we'll go over to you next, please.
Thanks, Eric. Hello, everybody. I'm Eric Rode. I'm responsible for global travel and T&E analytics at Facebook. Focus on managing end-to-end processing, including the operation, supplier relationships, as well as any travel technology. With regard to sustainability, we as a group, in partnership with our sustainability team at the company, have been tracking and reporting on greenhouse gas emissions for some years now. However, with our company's recent announcement of a net zero 2030 goal, with corporate travel specific details to become publicly announced later this quarter, this has become a much bigger focus area for our team. So we've really been digging in there and are excited to make an impact.
That's fantastic, Eric. Thank you for that one. All right, let's begin. So our first topic, let's start our conversations around, should employees have control over their corporate travel? A recent study conducted by SAP Concur shows that 85% of corporate travels have some or complete control over their travel. That same study indicated that nearly half of the respondents think a lack of information in their booking options actually compromises the sustainability of their business travel. So my first question is, the research shows a majority of employees do have ownership, but perhaps aren't empowered with the right info to influence their decisions. Viviane, from your experience, how can this be achieved?
I think the figures here are really interesting because it shows that travelers have the control, but they are missing information on sustainability. And I would say it really reflects the situation at BNP Paribas. I have the feeling that travelers today get really confused with a lot of information they have during the booking process, and they have to make a decision between the schedule, the price, the airline, the sustainability, and so on. So I think they really get lost, and they would need guidance here, and maybe HR or CSR teams could help with that.
Would you mind elaborating on the great program launched by BNP Paribas that helped spread the awareness?
Yes, we have a transversal program in place, which is called Green Company for Employee. And basically, it was launched by a department named Company Engagement 2 years ago, and it aims to help the employees to adopt greener behaviors on their personal life and also professional life, of course. And one of the pillars was mobility, sustainable mobility, which includes electric cars, bikes, and so on. And of course, there's other kind of pillars.
Eric, what's going on at Facebook? Is there anything to add to that particular topic?
Yeah, definitely a few things to add. I love that program that Viviane mentioned there. It's something we could definitely learn from. As I mentioned a moment ago, we do have an ambitious net zero goal for 2030 that involves many components of our value chain, and it does have our senior management support as well. Regarding the question, at Facebook, responsible choice and experience are really key tenets of our travel program and a large part of employee satisfaction when they're on the road. The traveler generally knows what they need to be successful throughout their trip, or at least where to go with questions when they don't know. Mm-hmm. In addition, being a sustainably responsible human and company is becoming really important for our employees. To the point around lack of information around sustainability corporate travel, I, as a traveler, as well as travel manager, would agree that this is an area for improvement. I think there's opportunities to, provide more accurate data on emissions to our employees, as well as providing, our employees, letting them know what our company guidance is in this area. What should they be doing? What actions are we taking as a company? And finally, actionably informing the employee at the time where they're making choices of what the recommended or most sustainable options are when they're taking a trip. So it's a combination of getting better data, but then also providing insights so travelers can be proactive in taking better actions.
It's very interesting, Viviane and Eric. There is a lot of information out there. One of the things that I hear from both of you is, how do you make sure that the employees are aware of what the company is making available for the employees, but also what the company allows you to or not to do within your sustainable booking. Fantastic. Seema, I've got a question for you. Viviane mentioned CSR and HR could help provide a little bit more guidance on this particular topic. From your experience, how do you see this playing out?
Yeah, and it's a lot of what Viviane and Eric just talked about from an information perspective, but taking it up a level, it really starts at the top with leadership, defining what that social purpose is, and really being clear in articulating your policies around sustainability and what goals you're trying to achieve. And then, of course, the policies and the practical steps that you're taking to realize them, because ultimately you're asking people to break habits. It's going to change how people are used to doing things, and people don't really like seeing rules that they don't understand, or that they don't understand, what the rationale is for that rules, particularly when it's something that is so collectively important. Explaining that rationale means that people understand the positive contribution they're making. And then once they understand that, you foster the kind of culture around social purpose, and hopefully the rest of it starts to fall into place. And that's when you see, you know, the information kick in and the ability, the choices that help people to really be effective around how they are traveling.
So a little bit of simplification and education around what it actually means to be sustainable in travel, and then what routes that they could and couldn't be taking. Annette, a little bit curious from a vendor's perspective, do you have anything to mention in regards to this particular topic?
Well, I can fully support what my colleagues here said. There's so much happening right now in terms of information and options, how to make your travel more responsible, more sustainable. However, what we experience that it's really important to explain in a simple way, what's it really all about? What are your options, and are they real? Because we feel that many travelers are kind of suspicious if this is greenwashing or if it's really making a difference. Sure. And as there are so many choices out there, and it's really a science in itself to get through this jungle, it's, I think, really important for both corporates but also for airlines to make this more transparent, what's it really about, and support people making this choice. Because what we also see, if people are just overwhelmed and not sure what decisions they should do, they do nothing at all. And that for sure is the worst of all.
From Lufthansa's point, or an airline, you mentioned greenwashing versus something that actually makes an impact. I understand that there's some stuff going on around sustainable airline fuel. Do you mind mentioning something about that?
Absolutely. So what's quite common today is that you compensate your flight by offsetting and, for example, planting trees. And this is a good thing. Sure. However, everyone needs to be aware that if you're offsetting today with trees, it will be working in about 20 years from now. We are together in the whole industry working on sustainable airline fuel. So having not the fossil kerosene, but having an alternative which can already be carbon neutral right now, being made of waste, and we're even working on solutions which are called power to liquid. So extracting the carbon out of the air and making it into liquid and kerosene again. So there's a lot of development ongoing. It is already available right now in very small quantities. But today, if you want to have a fully sustainable flight being compensated today using sustainable airline fuel, it would be possible if you're willing to do so.
Excellent. That's very informative. Thank you. Eric, within Facebook, just touching on this particular topic, what do you think about some of the challenges are of handing the employee the opportunity to make their own choices, knowing that there's what Annette just touched on with flights with SAF, with sustainable airline fuels? What do you think about picking or choosing vendors that are taking some of this sustainability action?
Yeah, I really agree with almost everything Annette said. I think there's a lot of challenges, but there's also a lot of opportunities here. I think there's work that we can do with whether it's aligning incentives, whether it's improved vetting and normalization of emissions data so that people understand what they're looking at and what it means. A couple key opportunities here might include, developing new progressive metrics that better reflect the balance of the experience, productivity, and sustainability costs. I think we can also optimize our external booking tools to provide better guidance or to reflect the good work that is being done by certain airlines and partners, particularly around sustainable airline fuel. But then also there needs to be a strong internal communication program that makes employees aware of all this external work and partnership being done so that, we can continue to partner with those vendors and create that result.
Thank you for that. One of the things I think I heard specifically around that is the booking process, informing the traveler of some of the things that they could be doing at time of booking. So letting them know that it is okay to take more sustainable routes, whether it be flights or trains or what have you, so that they can make that choice in an educated fashion. So thank you for that one, Eric. A little bit of a complex question. Should sustainable corporate travel be enforced through strict policy or by empowering employees with information and tool? And I say it's complex because it is a very tricky one to answer. Viviane, would you mind sharing your thoughts around that particular question?
BNP Paribas, the choice of the trip proposal is done by the traveler, of course, at the time of booking, but there is a framework in place. They cannot just book anything they want. So first of all, there is what we call an invisible enforcement in the tool. So they only see the green suppliers to be available. It means that during the sourcing process, we assess the suppliers with a dedicated CSR questionnaire to verify if they are green or if they are not green. And these suppliers are considered as preferred suppliers, and they are really pushed during the booking process. And the second point is the travel policy. So sustainability is a part of that, of course. And I have a concrete example on that. A few years ago, we introduced a new rule to make train mandatory for a certain route in France, for domestic route. And it was mandatory to take the train instead of the plane, and people had no choice. And of course, they were quite unhappy at first, but slowly it gets adopted, and today we have 100% of the travelers taking the train, and I'm convinced that if it was not written in the policy, they wouldn't have taken the train in the first place. So I would say policy and booking tools are connected.
A fine balance between the two. Mm-hmm. Eric, you at Facebook, you've got a lot of travelers globally. How are you guys enforcing this? Is it through strict policy, or are you empowering through tools?
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, to the earlier point, just as a reminder, key tenets of our program to this point have been choice and experience. Within policy guidance, utilizing a defined framework of vetted suppliers and rates. So knowing that, to the question, it's both. It's not. There's a lot that was said before me that resonates, but there's a lot of work to be done on improving data and information, as well as optimizing tools. That unless we do that, supporting a scaled sustainability policy will be really challenging. So I think one supports the other. And frankly, this is how we, in our role, have an opportunity to provide value to the company, is making that process easy and seamless for travelers. The approach we're taking here is to better define the issue and inform employees with data from the get-go. Once we get that sort of well-known and better circulated, improving our processes and having the opportunity to provide that guidance and optimize sustainable travel to be the norm instead of the sort of, it's on you to figure it out. I think we'll be in a good position there to start looking at where's this working well? How do we continue to iterate locally and globally? And at a certain point, there won't be objective reasons to not use the recommended sustainable option. And a policy designed with data in mind to say, why aren't you taking the sustainable option? And we'll just continue learning and incenting travelers to make those correct decisions.
Excellent. Thank you for that one. Annette, from a vendor's perspective, how are you seeing this when you're interacting with your customer base?
Well, a long time ago, it has started that corporates have asked us for data. But in the beginning, it was only when it came to RFP data. So it was a kind of like checkbox thing. Are you taking some action on sustainability? Do you respect human rights? All these things. Today, it's massively changing because the amount of data corporates are asking for, it's continuously raising. And it's not just within an RFP, but also we have first cases where corporates ask us for concrete data for concrete flights. And what I really wonder is, many corporates right now say, okay, sustainability for us really becomes a decision factor. However, in many cases, the sustainable choice is more expensive. For example, direct flights are normally more expensive than, for example, transfer flights. And so is it really then that in the end there will be the decision for the more sustainable flight? Will it be the decision for the airline doing more for the environment, using more SAF whatsoever? That's still to be proved.
I agree with that. And I've heard very similar feedback from multiple different types of vendors, TMCs, other types of vendors as well, around moving away from RFPs as a tick in the box exercise. What is your program? What are your thoughts around this, et cetera, to more of a, how are you going to help me and my company become more sustainable? So it's interesting to hear you say that one. In regards to, the sustainability, they do cost a bit more, typically speaking. One of the other things that would be considered is the total cost of trip, which the sustainability aspect could and does come into that conversation as well. So maybe it's a monetary, more expensive to take that direct flight or use SAF. However, what's the cost to the environment? What's the cost for the carbon emissions, so on and so forth. So very interesting. Thank you for that. The individuals need to make their decisions themselves, and they need to feel comfortable with those decisions as well. But there comes a point where there is no choice and the corporate policy should be followed. Duty of care is one reason for that. So to summarize on this topic, look for travel alternatives. If you do have to travel, look at greener choices. Sustainable choices are not always available, so ask your company how to compensate individually or as a company. And of course, technology can assist with all three of those steps. Moving to our second topic, this one focuses on changing behaviors and attitude. 39% of the travelers haven't considered sustainability in their travel. Education or incentives are ways to potentially make an impact on changing behaviors. We've discussed that employees need autonomy, that both policies and tools are important to achieve a more sustainable corporate travel future. So how can employees or the employee's experience be improved to aid corporate travelers in a more sustainable decision-making process? Viviane, would you mind commenting on that question?
I would say KPIs and visual guides can be really powerful here. But as I said before, people often get confused with too many information, so we have to find the right level of information to give them.
And what kind of metrics could companies be revealing to their travelers?
Well, the most common one is actually right now the one, what's your amount of CO2 you're using up? And so many people are comfortable when they can compare it to something. And when you look at the Paris Climate Agreement and you look at, okay, how much CO2 budget is left, then it's also said that each one of us has about 6.8 tons per year to be used personally. And so whenever you see a flight and it tells you, okay, this will use 1 ton of your CO2 budget, you can maybe put it into perspective. And then you can also see, okay, how much should I compensate? What's the rest of my lifestyle? So do I have a car? What's the energy I'm using? And so I can make my decisions and can somehow get a feeling for this quite abstract figures. However, I feel that also to make it more tangible, we need to come up with better explanations for these kinds of metrics, because so far it's maybe not good enough yet.
That's, that is definitely putting it into a real world scenario, easier for me to kind of wrap my mind around when you link it to the Paris Agreement. This is our allotment for the year, and if I'm taking X amount of flights, what do I need to compensate elsewhere to make up for that one? Very informative. Thank you, Annette. We can also see that almost 2/3 of corporate travelers didn't really think about sustainability when they were traveling. Do you think it's still true even after the events of 2020? I know that I haven't traveled since March. How could sustainability in corporate travel be more front of mind for us all? Seema, what do you have to say on that particular question?
So I'd be very surprised if that number didn't look quite different now. And to your point, Eric, the first time that I flew was 9 months after the pandemic started in London. And I remember feeling that this is incredibly indulgent, and it felt like a very different experience for me personally. Firstly, I was acutely aware of risks that would never have occurred to me before, but also really alert to what impact my decision to travel was having on communities around me, the people around me, the people I was interacting with. But also I was really aware of things like, you know, how well was my airline treating vulnerable people? How well were they protecting their staff with PPE? How efficiently they were managing kind of the balance against infection risk, against things like waste and recycling. And I think it's not just on that personal level, but also across the board at a corporate level, we've seen quite a seismic realignment of values. And importantly here, from a practical perspective, as we mentioned, we've seen this almost complete halt to travel. It's now kind of cyclical and more geographical as infection rates fluctuate. But again, back to that moment to kind of have a stop and to think and to question habits. And if we can't make that connection between the need for sustainability in our corporate travel policies now, I struggle to see when we're actually going to make that connection. So now really is the perfect time to get things right. And certainly the businesses that we speak to, they don't want a return to the old normal. They're looking for something new. They're kind of adopting future-back thinking really as a secret to trying to build forward from the pandemic in a much more sustainable way. And of course, you know, to the point around carbon emissions, or the businesses that we speak to are looking at, you know, what is the cost of our previous travel policies, not just from a carbon perspective, but from a kind of pure financial perspective as well, and how can we do better when we resume travel.
Very informative. I think that, I'm sure the first flight that I will take post-COVID will be something that I very much have front of mind of what is this like? What will this be doing? What will the impact be? How much luggage will I take, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I think it will definitely be a top of mind for me. Viviane, would you mind commenting on the same question in regards to BNP?
Yes, I totally agree with Seema. I think the pandemic really made people think about their old habits and wanted to change things in the future. And at BNP Paribas, we're also thinking about how we can be more supportive to suppliers which played an important role during the pandemic. Like, for example, hotel chains who got hospital staff in their rooms during the pandemic. And I think we can improve that.
Eric, what about Facebook? How is the kind of circuit breaker, if you want to call it that COVID has instituted on global travel? How is that playing out at Facebook?
I don't know how big the COVID impact is having specifically on sustainability awareness. You know, historically, employees have been aware that they have an impact, but like others said, not to what degree or how to contextualize that in real world terms. Culturally, employees here focus on impact. For every unit of work they have, where can they have the best output? And so a few years ago, as a company, we announced that our global operations were going to be 100% funded by renewable energy. That goal has since just been completed. So as a company that runs massive data centers, that was the disproportionately large emission previously. And so at the time, corporate travel was just a sliver of the total emissions, but since that's now been addressed, as we look to the next opportunities for impact to reduce our company footprint, Scope 3 or corporate travel, which falls into that within our value chain, is one of the next items up. So now that's where the focus is being driven. So I think that they were aware, but now we're getting more questions. There's more energy around what is my impact? How do I improve that? What do I do about it? And so to points mentioned earlier, it's our responsibility to provide better data, to give better insights on how they can travel, how they can work differently to accomplish the same goals while being a bit kinder to the environment.
I didn't know that about Facebook. That's really cool. Good to hear. Annette, from your perspective, obviously as an airline vendor, people are still taking flights, but not to the degree they were a year ago. What do you think when we start to have mass travel again, what do you think people's attitudes are going to be like?
Absolutely. So we do see both trends actually. So for sure, we do expect not all the corporate travel and also maybe not the private travel coming back to the same extent as it used to be, at least not for the upcoming 2-3 years. Because I think people start rethinking, is that now really necessary? And I mean, just personally, you know, I have traveled so much all over Europe, and it's also kind of yeah, sometimes a relief, and you ask yourself, okay, it's also a good lifestyle not to be all the time on the plane. So that's what I also hear from lots of other people who have traveled a lot before. However, we also see that I think every one of us has experienced that we're also seeing limits, what you can do in a virtual way. And that there is a strong need for personal meetings, and there is a strong need for discovering the world, and also for meeting your loved ones all over the world, because families have become more complex, and you want to visit your sister in New York, you want to be at the wedding of your friend in India, you know, all these things what had to be paused over the crisis now. And so we do expect a lot of travel to come back. However, maybe it won't be yeah, all the excesses we saw before. You know, do I really have to travel like 10 times a week all over Germany? Can I reduce that, or do I really have to do this long haul travel on a private basis again, or can I reduce that? So we expect these kind of thinking. However, we also see the big need for traveling again and meeting people personally.
Couldn't agree more, Annette. I think 2020 has definitely been the hard part, which is breaking the cycle. And now we have an opportunity to start new habits. I know for me, specifically similar to you, I was a frequent traveler. I haven't traveled in quite a while. I'm eager to do it again, but it won't be to the capacity it was prior to 2020. There will be a lot more thought into how am I going to travel, what's the frequency, what's the methodology, so on and so forth. So very interesting.
A colleague of mine recently compared it to, you know, you don't have to become a vegan from one day to the other. So it doesn't have to be such a drastic decision. And for many of us, traveling is just a part of our lives for many different reasons. But maybe reducing the number of days a week you're having meat, you know, that already helps. And it's yeah, I think many of us have started thinking more again about their travel style and travel habits.
Yep. Small changes equate to big changes when we combine the total globe. Absolutely. Excellent. So topic 3, our third topic and final one for today, is the role of HR as a sustainability change agent. Viviane, I'd like to ask this question to you. How much do you engage with the HR department when you're talking about sustainable corporate travel?
HR is engaged because they are the approvers of the travel policy. And as I said before, sustainability is part of the policy. So they are engaged, but I would say they are mostly engaged on the traveler well-being aspects, because the travel policy, of course, impacts the traveler comfort. So far, our collaboration is mostly articulated around that, and on a day-to-day basis, unfortunately, I don't engage a lot about sustainability with them. But I would say they have great means of communication to all employees in the group, and I think we could benefit from that to communicate to the travelers about sustainability better.
So I think I heard you say that potentially HR didn't see travel as part of sustainability. So Seema, from your experience, what do you think HR's role is on this particular topic?
Yeah, and I think part of the challenge is that there are a number of stakeholders involved in corporate travel within a business. So HR, mobility, immigration, tax, social security, and those stakeholders are often using different tech, or they're using different data, and those data silos have meant that integration has historically been quite challenging. But those silos really came to the fore. They were brought to attention in initial response to the pandemic. And firstly, that was regarding the protection of people. And initial pandemic responses, trying to find people who were stranded as the restrictions immediately started to come on, were very challenging where those silos existed. And secondly, with borders closed and the movement of talent suspended, businesses that had an integrated view of their global talent and their capabilities did much better from an operational continuity perspective. So to some extent, the pandemic has really kickstarted that integration journey. And when we talk about mobility, when we talk about HR, well, mobility really fundamentally is about agility, it's about flexibility. And the pandemic really has made us all mobile workers now. But there are a lot of really challenging regulatory, sustainability, productivity risks and all of that. And HR and mobility really need to work very closely in a cohesive way to build a sustainable corporate travel future. And I worry that if you only tackle the problem in isolation, you're looking at the same problem in isolation, you're really only going to be half as good as you could be if you were doing it together.
So breaking down the silos, working as a community, if you want to call it that, to tackle these big problems. Thank you for that, Seema. Eric, do you have anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I really like what Seema said. Silos don't work. We have to collaborate. To that end, last year, the leadership of our team and organization organized and launched what we're calling an internal advisory council, specific to T&E topics with stakeholders representing groups from around the company. It was a really big effort. HR, of course, is included within that, actually represented in a couple of different ways. This is so we can be aligned on a range of topics, from budgets to the experience of employees to the hiring and retention in a globally equitable fashion, et cetera. This was a key group that we just launched, as we just launched a refreshed T&E policy at the beginning of this year. And honestly, as we continue to move forward on a number of topics, including travel sustainability, this group is going to be a key group that we collaborate with.
Annette, as a vendor, how do you interact with a client's HR department?
Well, there are cases definitely where we interact with the HR department. However, in many cases, it's still the procurement departments who are in the lead when it comes to securing their airline contracts. In the past, when it was together with HR, it was a lot about travel comfort, and especially in industries where there was a war for talent, and if people travel a lot, it was a factor for companies. If you send them economy class to Australia, or if you only get the talents if you give them a minimum kind of comfort, right? So, but we definitely expect that the sustainability factor is becoming bigger. But we don't see a trend yet that it shifts more towards HR. It's still a big procurement issue.
Okay, thank you for that one. So how important do you think that the role of HR really is in making the sustainability message resonate, defining purpose, policy, and practice? Annette, I'm going to come back to you. You mentioned that you're in a new role. There's been some changes within your organization. How is HR currently involved, or do you anticipate them being involved in this particular question?
Well, what HR sees massively is, we do a once a year feedback study with all our employees, and the people are really asking for becoming more sustainable as an airline company, because nobody wants to be ashamed to work for Lufthansa Group, because everyone thinks, oh, you're you're the bad CO2 guys. And so we see lots of people, especially younger people, who want to engage and who it's important for them to work also in a sustainability related context and do their utmost to get Lufthansa Group onto this path and get further on that. So for me, it's just natural that I will interact a lot with HR, because I also think of course, it has to come also from the top, but it has to be driven by the people and has to be an attitude of a company if you really mean it to become a sustainable company.
We're all in it together kind of messaging, right?
Absolutely.
Very good. Seema, do you notice any maturity stage differences with your client portfolio on how they perceive HR's involvement in this topic?
Yeah, it really depends on the nature, the size of the organization, how you're defining maturity in this context, but also very much the culture. And sectors where travel is existential to their business will really need to focus on getting this right very quickly. And I think no sector is getting that maturity exactly right just yet, but there are some standouts that we see. And the most mature in this space will be the ones that see how all of these issues collide. They have the data to understand how they as a business and how their people are impacted by reference to previous experience. And the culture and trust of their employees, they have that to get the buy-in, and they really proactively move to get ahead of these challenges.
Excellent. Thank you, Seema. So just kind of tying into the previous question, which was talking about HR making this resonate, how can we help or incentivize employees to make some of these changes? How can HR ensure employees are going to stay engaged and happy and continuing to be productive at work through a sustainability conversation? So we should be showing a slide around some of the ways to incentivize employees on this one. So carbon offsetting, financial incentives, so on and so forth. Seema, how can HR help us as employees, help their employees stay engaged and happy and productive through this sustainability conversation?
I think it's some of the things that we heard about a bit earlier. So having those kind of key performance indicators, being able to see the impact of the decisions that are being taken, and in some cases where decisions aren't being taken, what the negative impact of that is. But I think most importantly, it's about visible leadership, holding yourself accountable, really sticking close to your goals, and leading by example throughout.
Viviane, you mentioned something earlier about concrete examples and a good success story from Paris on the train. Do you mind just adding in how has HR kind of helped you in this particular conversation?
Yes, it was a policy change, so they had to validate it, and they did. And we saw with this example that we had immediately two kinds of benefits. So when we switched from the plane to the train, of course, we generate CO2 emission reductions. That was the first benefit from this initiative. The second one is financial savings, because for this particular route, the train was cheaper than the plane. So it's also a good example that sustainability doesn't mean that it's more expensive. And the third consequence, which may be a surprise, is that now 2 years later, we conducted a survey to see if, what people think now about this initiative, and if they are ready to go further. Because, at the beginning, they were very unhappy with this decision. They said, are you crazy? The train takes too long. The train station is far from the office, and so on. So it has a lot of change management to conduct. And now what we saw is that they are ready to go even further by train, and they are changing their minds. So I think that it's really good to start with something small, and it can lead to bigger changes after that.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Viviane. What kind of business benefits have you seen work or not work when encouraging business travelers to be more sustainable?
Well, what we see, and so I definitely can understand what Seema and Viviane said, is lots of corporates are now very much tracking their programs and how much savings they generate and how much CO2 they are generating by flying and how to compensate that. So that's definitely a big trend, and we fully support that, and we also provide the tools for doing that. And what we also see is that that more and more, especially frequent travelers, they like the opportunity to have an easy option to compensate, but it's important for them to show it. So what we see is that as long as it's kind of hidden, there's no big incentive. So what we've launched, for example, in December is the so-called mindful flyer, where you can also share your status that you have compensated your flight or that you have been on a sustainable travel. I think it's so important for everyone to measure. It's a little bit like you do a sports program, right? And as soon as you give the opportunities to measure, people immediately start using it more and also get more emotionally connected to it. And so we try to just support these kinds of trackings and measurement and supporting processes, so that corporates like where Viviane and Sima work, we support them by changing their behavior.
A little gamification, a nice award and reward. I'm doing something right, and here's my badge for it. That's fantastic. Eric, how about Facebook? What kind of benefits are benefiting the business when you have your travelers being a bit more sustainable?
Taking it as a reset, but those sort of benefits are the ones that we're looking to find ways to be more, employ more scalably, if you will.
Well, that concludes my my list of questions today, and I really appreciate the conversation that we've had. I'd like to just quickly wrap up with some key takeaways that I've kind of picked up on, which are the benefits that come with incorporating sustainability practice into your organization. I think that there's a lot of benefits. I'm picking up on a lot of benefits that each of you have shared around putting this in kind of to the forefront of minds. I think there's the individual giving the employee the opportunity to kind of make their own choices, but in an educated way that is not only improving their experience, but also improving the impact to the environment. Viviane, you shared some really great examples of how you've put policy into practice. You're still giving the employees that opportunity to make their own decisions, but you've kind of given them the nudge to make sure that they're taking greener options. Sima, you also provided a lot of really good concrete examples for food for thought around that particular one. Encouraging the sustainable mindset. I mean, there's a lot of good examples you guys have shared today. We've had a long year of an opportunity to kind of change the way that we've been just working as usual. And now is an opportunity to be a little bit more mindful and think about, or actually engage in understanding what we can do as individuals, as employees of our businesses. And on the final takeaway that I have is who to engage. There's a lot of different parts of the business or a business that come into play when we're talking about a sustainable business travel conversation. So who do we engage with? How do we optimize the employee's experience? Is it travel? Is it procurement? Is it HR? Is it mobility? It's a combination. And of course, let's not forget the employees themselves. There's a whole bunch of people that need to be in this conversation for us to make an impact. So let's make sure that we do that. So Viviane, Sima, Annette, Eric, I want to just thank you guys for the conversation today. You guys have given me personally a lot of food for thought and a lot of inspiration that businesses around the globe, employees of these businesses are really focused on making an impact on the environment in a positive way. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to have this conversation. And for the audience, I hope that you guys all have at least one nugget of food for thought to take away. Thank you.